Alexander Volkanovski is biting off more than he can chew, rushing into a fight with Ilia Topuria only 4 months after getting brutally KO'd courtesy of an Islam Makhachev head kick. I understand a lot of you guys are going to rush to the comments and say things like, how the heck can you write Volkanovski off? This is disgusting. MMA fans are so fickle. I'm literally Volkanovski's biggest fan. So I don't want to hear any of that, right? I'm not in Peaches and Cream Town where there aren't any consequences to taking a devastating KO. And I'm also not trying to hear those comments saying, well, Alex Pereira got KO'd by Izzy and turned around 3 months later and won. Yeah, I know. He moved up a weight class, gained 20 pounds, which does wonders for your ability to take a punch. You're basically removing the weight cut. So you're not dehydrating your brain before fighting. And unlike Alex Pereira, Volkanovski's cutting back down to featherweight to fight someone that has knockout power. There are some issues here, all right? So let's get out of Peaches and Cream world where a knockout doesn't mean anything and, oh, he's back on the horse. He's back on the horse and he can go until he's 50 and fighters just don't change and they don't age. Welcome to reality. But let's actually address a legitimate argument against the fact that Volkanovski could lose this fight, and that would be that Lucas, well, Volk's been dominating featherweight for such a long time. This is actually a step down in competition, and for Ilia Topuria, that's a big step up. I mean, who did he last beat, and who the hell has he beat overall? We're talking about Bryce Mitchell and Josh Emmett. I mean, let's be honest, and I don't want to beat around the bush. Josh Emmett's not even a poor man's Alexander Volkanovski. He's a impoverished version of Alexander Volkanovski if you were to take a dump on it, okay? So we can only really hype up that win so much, but I still gave his last fight a watch, and I gave it a gander. And I will say that Ilia Topuria, oh man, he has what it takes to knock Volkanovski out. He really has what it takes. And one of the things I want to discuss is this uncanny similarity between the beginning of Volkanovski's career and Ilia Topuria's career thus far. I mean, when I say similar, I really mean it. Undefeated, short and stocky builds with well-rounded skill sets, the ability to dismantle people on the feet as well as the ground, constant evolution from one fight to the next. All right, so we're talking about guys that have the same build, that were both undefeated at one time. And even though everyone respected Volkanovski on the come up and we were impressed by his performances, like for example, he schooled Jose Aldo, he knocked out Chad Mendes, he was also gearing up to fight a dominant champion for his first ever title fight, that being Max Holloway. And again, even though people knew Volk was good, most people were not expecting him to beat Max or shut him down the way that he did. And Ilia Topuria is under the same circumstance where a lot of people know how good he is, but they're not really expecting him to be good enough to dethrone the pound for pound or the former pound for pound king. And you also have to take into account that as soon as Volk got into the UFC, he had been preparing for Max Holloway because Max was the champion at the time. That's the guy that was setting the standard, and all of the contenders have the fortune of getting to prepare for the champion longer than the champion has to prepare for them. And Ilia Topuria, ever since he's gotten into the UFC, he's had the fortune of preparing for Volkanovski. That's the guy that's been on his mind. Whereas, for example, when Max Holloway was a champion, he was worried about Dustin Poirier and Frankie Edgar, and he only has a 4-month training camp to get ready for Volk. Well, this time, Volk's been worried about Yair. He's been worried about Islam Makhachev. He's had bigger fish to fry. Now he's got 4 months to prepare for Ilia Topuria. And he just got knocked out a few months ago. And if we're going to talk about Volkanovski's chin, because let's make no mistake, although Volkanovski lacks a lot of weaknesses, he's one of the most complete fighters we've ever seen. Dude, he gets hit in his fights. And contrary to popular belief, Alexander Volkanovski has an iron chin at featherweight. He gets hit quite a bit, and he gets hit flush. Rewatch that fight with Yair Rodriguez. He's getting hit with head kicks. He's getting hit with flush right hands. Rewatch his fight with someone like Brian Ortega, man. And people clown Ortega for his striking. Dude, he was clipping Volkanovski hard. It's just that they had no effect on Volk. And for every single one of these shots that people can land on Volk, he can usually land his 5 or 6 because he's got tons of volume. And he is a guy that does have some power, but it's nowhere near the level of Ilia Topuria's. Ilia's skill set it's still a little bit green. It's still not as well-rounded and developed as Volkanovski's. His tool bag, it's not as deep. But he has the ability to hit Volkanovski because, man, when I say he is probably one of the most underrated boxers in the UFC, you know what? Fuck that. He is the most underrated boxer in the UFC. And that's because nobody talks about this guy's defense. And this is really what I want to get to. We know that Ilia Topuria's got real good power. He's got great combinations, fast hands, but it's his defense that impressed me the most when watching his fight back against Josh Emmett, okay? And what I saw was the same shoulder roll that we were all so impressed with by Sean Strickland when he fought Adesanya. Everything that got thrown at Ilia Topuria in his fight with Josh Emmett was countered with a shoulder roll so that he can slip out of the way and roll with the punches. And we know that Josh Emmett's claim to fame is his big power and these big meaty hooks over the top. Well, Ilia Topuria was rolling with all of them, and that really took the sting off of Josh Emmett's impact. And again, it's not just the shoulder roll. He's got the ability to counter immediately after slipping out of the way of these shots. And he just, when he lets his hands go, man, nobody is better than him in the pocket. Volk's going to get a taste of his own medicine for the first time in his career since fighting Chad Mendes. Ilia Topuria, just like Volkanovski, has the low center of gravity. He's got the short, stubby, tree trunk legs that everyone talks about as being like the hardest kind of build to take down in a fight. And we saw that with Islam Makhachev. It was hard for him to take Volkanovski down and to keep him down as well. It's because he could just pop right back up. There's barely any difference between Volkanovski when he's on the ground and when he's standing up, man. So he's going to feel the same kind of build this time. It's not going to be a long, lanky Yair Rodriguez. It's not going to be a long, lanky Max Holloway. Now, Volkanovski's grappling, it's getting better, right? Because he's always improving, and especially in the gym preparing for Islam Makhachev through working on his takedown defense, his offensive grappling has leveled up big time, and we saw it in the Yair Rodriguez fight. And I do think he can get the better of Topuria because he's a better grappler than Topuria. I know that people talk about Topuria as being this black belt on the ground and he's so skilled. He's a good grappler. He is. But he's not better than Volk. And anyone that argues that he is a better grappler than Volk, okay, where has he proven it on the ground? Oh, he stopped Ryan the Soy Boy Hall on the feet, who's got the pussiest style in the game. Nah. I understand that he did get the better of Bryce Mitchell, but he had basically rocked Bryce Mitchell so badly that Bryce Mitchell was on Crip Street, and he was just toast at the time in which he got submitted. Bryce Mitchell took Ilia Topuria down in their first round and actually controlled them, and I think that Volk is better than Bryce Mitchell on the ground too. For whatever reason, whenever there's a well-rounded fighter like Islam Makhachev, people are hesitant to say he's one of the best strikers in MMA or he's a better striker than someone that we perceive as one of the best strikers in MMA just because Islam Makhachev's the grappler or Alexander Volkanovski's the striker. How could you possibly say he's a better grappler than someone like Bryce Mitchell or Ilia Topuria? And it's like, bro, what the fuck has Ilia Topuria done to prove that he's a better grappler than Volk? He did have Josh Emmett on the ground at times, but he was going for submissions. He was on the back, and he wasn't really dishing out a lot of damage. And I worry that Ilia Topuria, guys, this is something that you will like to hear if you're a Volk fan. I worry that he's going to have a little bit of the tofu style on the ground. And what I mean is, remember, Volk does a great job at just kind of posturing up and floating over his opponents, spreading his base out over them and weighing them down without getting tangled into a jiu-jitsu style of match, right? He doesn't really tangle up with his opponents and give them opportunities to off on him and to land tons of shots on a guy that can slip back and counter so effortlessly. It's a real dangerous matchup, guys. And remember, none of us really expected Volkanovski to go out there and beat Max Holloway when he did, yet he went out there and schooled him. And I don't think that Ilia Topuria is going to school Volk, but he could level up enough to be able to chin him and knock him out. Because again, we are really asking for a lot if we want to see Volkanovski retain his featherweight belt at the age of 35 after getting knocked out, after going on a weight cut, because he would be defying Mother Nature and history, which tells us that there's never been a champion that's been able to hold on to their belt at 35 or older in any of the lightweight classes in MMA.